Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. On today's episode, in our cover story segment, Variety's intrepid investigative reporter, Tatiana Siegel, details her cover story that asks a straightforward question: what does David Ellison want? She teamed with Variety's Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly to capture how fast things are changing on the Melrose lot. And we'll also hear from Chris Willman, Variety's chief music critic, on why he has fallen for a certain concert venue near Palm Springs. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. The Motion Picture Association is not amused. Hollywood's top trade org has sent a notice to Meta ordering it to stop using the PG-13 movie rating to describe Instagram's framework for its new teen settings on the app. The trade group called Instagram's use of the PG-13 moniker, quote, literally false and highly misleading, end quote. Of course, there's more news from Paramount. The studio has unveiled a massive reorganization of its linear cable TV operations under CBS chief George Cheeks. Linear channels are not a growth business, but they do still churn out cash flow. Paramount leaders back in August vowed to hold on to these channels and not follow the lead of NBC Universal and Warner Brothers Discovery by divesting them with spin-off transactions. Managing these linear cable channels is going to be a big challenge for Cheeks and Company in the years ahead. Jimmy Kimmel Live has opened up a food bank around the corner from its Hollywood studio. They're collecting donations for the LA Food Bank and the St. Joseph Center. Good on you, Jimmy. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in showbiz. In today's cover story segment, Tatiana Siegel discusses her reporting on the changes blowing through the Paramount lot as the David Ellison regime takes over. The changes are many. It'd be too glib to call it the MAGA takeover of a founding Hollywood studio, but our dynamic trio report that you're seeing more Fox News on in executive offices as you walk the halls of the Melrose lot these days. Tatiana Siegel, thanks so much for joining me.
Glad to be back.
You have delivered us a story that is packed with information, details, color, and mood. I love it when we step back and say, okay, what is the mood at an important company in our business? And you, Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly, went out and endeavored to take the measure of what's going on at Paramount right now, which listeners know has been through quite a transformation. What are some of the biggest surprises that came out of your reporting?
I mean, surprises for me personally as a reporter was that there's so much dramatic change going on at a studio that, when a new regime takes over, you will inevitably see change, but it'll be more gradual. This is like wrecking ball, wood chipper kind of change happening overnight, where you're seeing a real overhaul of the various divisions. And you can tell a lot from on day one. The first movie that they buy is a Timothy Chalamet, James Mangold motocross thriller that's going to maybe cost up to $100 million. And, this is a movie that's kind of built for flyover audiences, red state America, if you will, or can appeal to both.
Right. A bit of NASCAR and a bit of Timothy Chalamet. That's an interesting bridge there.
Yes, exactly. Maybe it's like the winning formula, because I think it's fair to say that to some extent, Hollywood over the past 5 years was a little bit reluctant to program for middle America.
It's a sea change. And you really tapped into that. Your story describes the new regime. They're tougher. They're a little more pugnacious. They even argue with themselves. How is that playing out in broader Hollywood? And how is that playing out with the old timers that are still left at Paramount?
The layoffs of last week were quite dramatic. 1,000 people gone. I would say that optics matter very little because I think that at any other studio, which wasn't run by a millennial mogul who's the son of the second richest person in the world, there might be a little bit more fear of like, ooh, will people on social media say that we laid off too many women or cut too many programs that were considered progressive or whatever. I don't think that David Ellison is concerned with optics. And then the CBS News of it all and Barry Weiss, it's like a hydra with multiple tentacles of different dramas unfolding.
David Ellison has political connections and capital. You have so much detail. There's a lot of detail about specific projects which add up to a picture of what the studio wants.
The biggest deal that David Ellison has struck since taking over the studio is this UFC deal. It's worth $7.7 billion over 7 years. That's almost what the full price tag was of Paramount itself. And one of the interesting things I uncovered in the reporting is that I'm sorry, I have to laugh because there's something so crazy about it, but there's going to be a UFC fight on the White House lawn. And that's quite frankly astonishing. And, the White House gave a comment and said it'll be a spectacular event. It's kind of like something that 5 years ago I might not have been able to envision.
5 years ago, you would have thought it was South Park,
Exactly,
which is a
exactly.
Paramount property.
But maybe that is what the problem with the mentality of people inside the Hollywood bubble is like, get outside the bubble. And UFC has a lot of fans. It makes a ton of money. It's also global. So when this event takes place on the White House lawn next June, or June 2020, be visiting dignitaries and heads of state from all around the world, because in places like Saudi Arabia and whatnot, they love UFC. They're heavily invested in MMA. So I don't know. The business has been hurting. So why not try a different approach? And I think that that's exactly what Paramount is doing.
One thing about the UFC deal, that was an absolute gift to Ari Emanuel and the folks at TKO because the dynamics were such. Paramount needed to make a bold statement. It's like, we are going to invest in this. Let me ask you about Ellison's leadership style. Is he hands-on? What sense did you get about him as a leader?
So for years, he has been the Boy Scout of the Ellison family. Megan Ellison, his sister, had a lot more success initially as a sort of prestige producer and financier. And I think a lot of people saw David Ellison as the financier, maybe without the same amount of taste and the same great taste as his sister. But he's emerged as somebody in the last 6 months before the merger and in the 100 days since the merger, who appears to have a really strong vision of what he wants to do. And I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. I thought people thought, okay, this is somebody who can be kind of molded. And I think he has emerged as somebody who actually has been like waiting there in the bush and now is like pouncing.
To use another Paramount property, Star Trek, like he's Captain Kirk. He's sitting at the chair. He's got this incredible dashboard of movies, TV, digital, IP. You would think everything in the Paramount library has been remade, but there's a lot to go there. And again, he is, in fact, Hollywood's first millennial mogul.
Like 42 years old.
He's the CEO and he owns the place. That is very different. Brian Roberts of Comcast is the only corollary that I can think of off the top of my head, and Lachlan Murdoch. Let me ask you about Jeff Shell, who is an industry veteran that is well known, has been at Fox and NBC Universal, and he's was tapped to be Ellison's strong number two, a COO type of role. What did you get the sense about his impact on the company so far?
It's impossible to say because it's 100 days in, but I will say, and perhaps this is telling, that more people are talking about the Josh Greenstein, Dana Goldberg dynamic. They're the co-chairs of Paramount, and then Jeff is the president. So which one of these three, or is it Josh and Dana versus Jeff, are actually shaping the studio? And based on my reporting, it sounded to me like Josh and Dana.
And let's not forget Cindy Holland, who has enormous experience in the area. She's running Paramount Plus and all of their
Brought
8
in the
to
Duffer Brothers. That's a kind of deal that makes Ted Sarandos over at Netflix probably throw his cell phone at the wall. It definitely is not something that gives you a good night's sleep when you lose the Duffer Brothers to Paramount.
Right. Paramount said goodbye to Taylor Sheridan and hello to the Duffer Brothers. In terms of the Taylor Sheridan of it all, there was a history there that I think maybe it was it was time to move on. And NBC Universal also in a position where they needed to make a statement about what they were going to do going forward because NBC Universal is about to become a much smaller company. Oh, the
Yeah.
bouncing ball. We don't have enough hours in the day to cover everything that's going on. Listeners, go read the story. You're going to have to read it twice because it is densely packed with information. It takes a lot of fortitude to cover all this. Tatiana, thank you for being one of our most intrepid warriors. It's a great story, and it feels like it's part one of a multi-chapter book.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.
And now, Chris Willman, our inimitable chief music critic, talks us through his delightfully written story about his fondness for a newish venue outside of Palm Springs that has become a favorite of A-list touring artists. And then we geek out on our favorite LA music venues. Chris Willman, thanks for joining me.
Of course, glad to.
This past week, you wrote lovingly about one of your favorite venues, an arena that is outside, that is near Palm Springs. What prompted you to write this story this past week?
Well, they had recently had quite a series of bookings close together that were quite attractive. And it's not the busiest arena in California because it is a secondary market, and they have hockey for a lot of the year that keeps them from booking concerts. But I went out there twice in 3 days. Paul McCartney on a Monday, the first official show of his tour, and The Who on a Wednesday, their last US appearance ever, supposedly. But, in both cases, worth the drive, even though I had seen both those acts prior to that recently. Paul McCartney did a preview show that was not the official opening of the tour in Santa Barbara Bowl. I drove for that. And then The Who had just played the Hollywood Bowl, so I'd seen them. But both acts I just wanted to see again because how many chances are there going to be at this point? A long
Although
time.
this farewell tour business, I will believe it when I see it.
Of
Or when I
course, of
don't
course,
see it, I should say.
of course, of course. It means a little bit more now that they're in their 80s, but it's a little easier to swallow. Anyway, and I had been out there once before for a tour opening when Olivia Rodrigo opened her tour there at the beginning of last year with Chapel Roan opening, which was a very memorable show. When I was there for Olivia Rodrigo, I just sensed that I was enjoying it a lot more because of the relative intimacy, quote unquote, that we were not going to get when she came back later to play the Forum and the Intuit Dome, far bigger places.
Acrisure Arena holds 11,000 people.
Mhm.
Acrisure, which we just learned by looking it up, is an insurance company.
I think it's probably 10,000 when they don't have the back full, when they have that cut off. At least I've been told 10,000 is kind of their cap for concerts.
What
I think people are kind of pleasantly surprised and shocked when they walk in, even though they've looked at all the seating charts and everything. I started off the article by saying, is intimate arena an oxymoron? But it does have this sort of pleasant charm to it, even if you're in the back, you're on the same level as the stage. And I talked to Irving Azoff, who's one of the principals in it, backstage at one of these shows, and he basically said part of that missing top level above the loge level is out of the fact that it is a secondary market. They're not going to fill 18,000 seats as easily as someplace in LA. The other factor is that they have a height restriction because it's near an airport there in Palm Desert.
hmm.
And so they could not build an extra level without like digging down in the ground like they did with SoFi Stadium, where most of the venue's underground. So it was a mixture of the practicality of what's a good capacity for the area versus an actual zoning restriction that keeps this from having so-called nosebleed seats. There's no nosebleeds in the Acrisure Arena. It's a small arena, but it's still an arena. So, I mean, one of the advantages of it is that, at least for the acts that are coming in, like Paul McCartney coming in there, like Olivia Rodrigo, who also started her tour there, they can rehearse there. They can book the arena for a week or two ahead of the first night. Irving Azoff used the phrase, that they can hang their show. That's industry-ese for just they can put the full production on stage there because the stage is as big as any stage at the Forum or the Hollywood Bowl or anywhere else, even though the audience is
Mhm.
only 2/3 the size, but the stage is as big. So I think when those acts play the Acrisure, they're definitely wanting to do their full show. But it's kind of, it's a couple hours away from the industry. It's a couple hours away
Mhm.
from too many friends coming by to bug you unless you want them to come out. And so it's kind of that sweet spot, I think, of the out of town tryout in Broadway terms.
Acrisure is indoor, correct?
That's right. There is a roof on the joint. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris, all this talk of venues, you probably knew this was coming. Give me like your top 3 or 4 venues that you really just love to go see shows and that you love for the venue itself.
The first two that come to mind in the LA area, and I do have a favorite between them for specific reasons, but it's, the Greek and the Hollywood Bowl. Big size difference in that the Greek is like 6,000 and I think the Hollywood Bowl's around 17. So 3 times the size for the bowl. So again, the Greek at 6,000, not really intimate, quote unquote, but comparatively so. But there's something I like more about the Greek than the bull. Sorry to my many friends who work at or with the bull. But when I think of favorite venues, I think of where I'm a place I like to be as a setting, but also where I can concentrate most on the music.
Mhm.
And so one drawback for the bull there is that they've got their picnic baskets. Occasionally you hear the wine bottle.
There's always the wine bottle that goes
All the creature comforts or scenery aside is if it's my favorite band, am I just gonna be so locked in that I kind of forget for a minute about where we are? So that's why the Greek is my number 1 place. I'll just add one thing about the bowl in its favor, which is however many distractions there may be from picnickers or wine bottles or whatever, the acts themselves are so thrilled to be there, especially if it's their first time, and that can really affect their performance too.
Well, I'm gonna throw in the John Anson Ford. Is a smaller venue, but I love that venue. You really just feel like you're kind of in a magical place, and again, with the right artist, the right mood, you do really feel transported. Favorite venue that's out of California?
Ooh, that's tough. I love the Beacon in New York, so I've seen a lot of shows there over the years. Oh, and then I would say, the Gorge in Washington State, which I finally made it to when, Brandi Carlile and Joni Mitchell were doing a thing there before they did, the Hollywood Bowl the following year. You've got this whole canyon with a river running through it as a backdrop, as you sit on this high hillside, and, it takes some effort to get to. I think, it was about a 2.5-hour drive or something from Seattle. I think that and Red Rocks are the real kind of outdoor destination venues in the United States, and so, gonna do Red Rocks someday, but the Gorge is an incredible place.
The thing I always love about your work, Chris, is every time I read, feel your love for the music, for the artist, and in this case, for the venue. Chris, as always, thank you for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. There are a bunch of interesting TV series coming. On Thursday, Netflix unleashes a historical drama with a monster cast, Death by Lightning. It's the stranger than fiction true story of the assassination of President James Garfield in 1881. It stars Michael Shannon, Michael McFadden, Betty Gilpin, Nick Offerman, Shea Wiggum, Bradley Whitford, Vondi Curtis Hall, and more. On the documentary front, an interesting title that premiered at the Toronto Film Festival is heading to ESPN platforms on November 19th. Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, looks at how a new generation of entrepreneurs are trying to boost Africa's presence in the sport. Before we go, congrats to Helen Mirren. She will receive the Cecil B. DeMille Award from the Golden Globe Awards in January. She is the queen after all. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Tatiana Siegel and Chris Willman. Stick, snicks, hick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.